The planet Charon had long given up on hope. Its skies, once bright with twin moons, were now scorched by ash storms and the constant hum of orbital slavers circling overhead like vultures. For decades, its people had been nothing more than property, beaten, branded, and broken. The Eldari Empire had crushed every uprising, every whisper of rebellion, with fire and silence. The last message sent into the void for help was nearly 40 years ago. Everyone believed it disappeared into the dark, like everything else the Eldari touched. Terran had been born in chains. He'd never seen stars without bars between him and the sky. His father, once a scientist, died working the mines. His mother, a healer, was taken by an overseer after refusing to let a child die unattended. Terran had no family, no freedom, and no faith left. The only thing he had was anger, a deep, simmering hate that kept him moving, kept him from breaking like the others. He spent his days hauling metal through the acid fields, and his nights in a rusted-out shelter beneath the ruins of an old Terran relay station, the one that supposedly tried to reach Earth. The elders said it was a myth. Earth had forgotten them, abandoned them. Terran believed it too, or told himself he did, until the sky changed. It happened on a night like any other. Bitter cold, smoke-stung winds, the stench of fear hanging in the air. Terran was curled on the ground after a shift that nearly killed him, his arms trembling, his lungs raw. Then came the sound. A low, rumbling growl that wasn't thunder. It came from above, deep and layered, like the roar of a beast that had slept for too long. Others heard it too. They stumbled out of their huts, eyes wide, mouths agape. Even the overseers looked confused. Then came the light, a tearing ripple across the black sky, blue and searing. It didn't blink. It didn't flash. It cut through the darkness like a wound in the heavens. A ship. No, a fleet. Not Eldari. These ships were black and sharp-edged, scarred by war, and they moved like predators. They didn't come in with banners or speeches. They came in with weapons hot. The first blast hit the slaver compound near the eastern ridge. Terran watched in stunned silence as towers turned to fire, as overseers screamed into radios that stopped working mid-word. Anti-air batteries fired, but the ships danced through them like they were laughing. And then, something impossible. A voice crackled through the ruins of the old Terran relay station. Garbled, damaged, but undeniably human. "This is Earth Command. All Charon-born civilians are under our protection. Stand by for extraction and retaliation. You are no longer alone." Terran dropped to his knees, his body shaking not from exhaustion but from something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He didn't cry. Not yet. There wasn't time. Sirens wailed. Guards panicked. Some prisoners tried to run, others hid. Terran stood. He didn't know what he was about to do. All he knew was this: he wasn't going to die a slave. Not anymore. He grabbed a broken pipe from the ground. Around him, others began to move too. One man picked up a rusted shovel. A woman broke a chain off the wall and wrapped it around her fists. The fear that had kept them quiet all these years, it cracked like the sky had. And from that crack, something had broken free. Not just ships, not just soldiers, but humanity. The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and blood. Terran's legs moved on instinct, not direction. He sprinted through the choking dust clouds as the slave compound erupted in chaos. Eldari soldiers barked orders in that sharp, cold language of theirs. Gunfire cracked from the walls. Drones zipped through the sky, scanning, locking on, firing blindly into the smoke. But it was too late. Order was a ghost now. He ducked behind a stack of scavenged alloy panels as a drone passed overhead, its sensor beam cutting through the ash like a blade. It missed him by inches. Another boom rocked the ground as Earth's fighters strafed the compound again, fire pouring down like rain from hell. The sky wasn't the sky anymore. It was war. Behind him, a girl screamed. He turned. A young woman, maybe 17, was trapped beneath a collapsed scaffold, her leg pinned by a beam. An overseer drone was closing in, its claws extending. Darren didn't think. He charged it from the side, pipe raised. The first swing bounced off the drone's carapace with a loud clang. It turned on him, laser cutter flashing to life, but he was already moving. He ducked low, rolled under its sweep, and jammed the pipe into the joint beneath its left optic. It sparked, shrieked, and spun in a dying whirl before crashing into the dirt beside the girl. She looked at him with wide eyes. You're... Don't talk, he growled, grabbing the beam. Push with me, now! They heaved. Muscles screamed, backs arched. The metal gave way just enough for her to drag herself free, biting down on a sob. Her leg was mangled, but she was alive. Darren tore a strip from his shirt and tied it tight around her thigh. Get to the old fuel tanks. Hide inside them. If the human soldiers find you first, you'll be safe. If not... He paused. Fight. She nodded, tears streaking down her face. What about you? I'm not hiding. He rose and turned towards the central tower, the overseer's command post. If he was going to die, he wanted it to count. But he wasn't alone anymore. Around him, others were rising, a dozen, then 24. Men, women, old, young, it didn't matter. Slaves who had once been shadows now stood with blood on their hands and rage in their hearts. Some carried tools, others makeshift blades. One old man dragged a broken fence post like it was a war banner. They followed Darren. For the first time in his life, he was leading something. The march to the tower wasn't fast. Eldari forces were still dug in, and their rifles still cut men down like wheat. But they weren't prepared for this. Slaves refusing to run, refusing to kneel. For every one of Darren's people that fell, 2 more surged forward, shrieking war cries no one had heard in decades. And then the humans landed. 3 dropships, sleek and black, punched through the sky like meteors. They hit the ground outside the compound, their bay doors flung open even before the dust settled. The soldiers that emerged weren't like the polished, perfect warriors the Eldari had paraded in their propaganda. These men were rough, scarred, armored in matte gray exosuits, each one carrying weapons that looked older than the Empire itself. But there was a fire behind their visors. They moved with brutal precision, cutting down enemy squads in seconds. One of them saw Darren and nodded once, acknowledging him not as a victim, but as a comrade. The humans split into 2 squads. One advanced toward the barracks, clearing out Eldari snipers. The other flanked the central tower, using grenade bursts and shock mines to scatter defenders. Darren didn't stop. He hit the tower's gate with a stolen rifle in hand, flanked by 2 teenage boys and a limping older man with nothing but a sharpened shovel. Inside, the overseer captain, a towering Eldari in obsidian armor, waited with a shock baton and 3 guards. You filthy animals, the overseer hissed. Earth won't save you. You're insects. Darren didn't reply. He lifted the rifle and fired. The shot caught the guard square in the throat, dropping him instantly. The room erupted. One of the teenage boys was gunned down before he could even swing. The other tackled a guard, screaming and stabbing wildly. Darren locked eyes with the captain. They clashed in the middle of the room, baton against pipe. The Eldari was stronger, faster, trained to kill. He broke Darren's pipe in two and slammed the butt of his weapon into Darren's stomach, sending him sprawling. "You think this changes anything?" the Overseer snarled, standing over him. "We own this galaxy. You're nothing." Darren spat blood. "Then why are you bleeding?" The captain glanced down. Too late. The old man's shovel had been rammed into his side, slipping between armor plates. He screamed and turned, backhanding the old man across the room. But the distraction was enough. Darren surged up with the broken half of his pipe and drove it into the Overseer's throat. The alien gurgled, fell, and twitched once before going still. The silence that followed was thunderous. Outside, cheers echoed across the compound. More Earthships were landing. More fires burned. The Eldari command network was collapsing, their signals cut, their air support gone. The humans were pushing through the outer camps now, their weapons shredding slave barricades. But only to reach them, not to hurt them. The people of Terran weren't prisoners anymore. They were survivors. A soldier approached Darren, his armor scratched, his rifle slung casually over his shoulder. His voice was deep, steady, and carried that calm only killers ever had. "You the one who started this mess?" Darren wiped blood from his mouth. "Guess so." The soldier offered a hand. "Name's Briggs. Earth Recovery Division. We're here to wipe the slate clean." Darren didn't take the hand. He looked around at the rubble, the bodies, the smoke. "Why now?" he asked. "Why after all this time?" Briggs didn't flinch. "Because someone finally heard your signal, and some people on Earth still give a damn." Darren stared at him for a long time. Then he took the hand. Not as a slave. Not as a victim. As a man, they walked out of the tower together, past the wounded, the dead, and the rising. The humans were handing out supplies, real food, medical kits, water. The people of Karan stared at them like they were ghosts. A woman approached Darren. She had a baby in her arms and blood on her face, but her voice was calm. "My son wants to know what we should call you now," she said. Darren blinked. "What?" "You led the charge. You gave us a future. He wants to know what to call the man who broke the sky." He didn't know what to say. But behind him someone murmured it, then another. "Breaker." The word spread. Darren the Breaker. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired, sore, and barely alive. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel small. Not anymore. The fires hadn't stopped burning. Days passed, but the smoke still curled in the air like the ghost of every scream Karen had ever swallowed. What was left of the slave compound had become a triage zone. Makeshift tents, rows of stretchers, the constant drone of med scanners. This was what liberation looked like. Darren didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl pinned beneath the beam. The boy shot before his blade even reached the guard. The captain's dying face, blood bubbling through his alien gills. All of it lived inside his skull now, and silence only made the memories louder. Earth's soldiers had set up command outposts around the edges of the ruins, perimeter guns humming quietly behind invisible barriers. Most of them didn't speak much. They kept to themselves, eyes always scanning, fingers never far from the triggers. Darren understood that look. They weren't here to comfort. They were here to finish what had been started. Briggs found him sitting on a collapsed column, watching the transport ships rise and fall in the ash-choked horizon. "Not celebrating?" the soldier asked, crouching beside him. "Celebrate what?" Darren muttered. "That we're still breathing?" Briggs didn't argue. "Breathing's a start." Darren looked at him. You ever been a slave? Briggs shook his head. Then don't talk like you get it. Briggs didn't flinch. You're right. I don't. But I've seen people lose everything. Watched my entire unit burned alive on Daris Fee. Held my brother while he bled out in a trench on Ceres. You think I came here for glory? I came because I couldn't sleep either. Darren turned away. So what now? Now? Briggs stood. Now we rebuild. We stabilize. And eventually, we put a bullet through the skull of every last Eldari commander still walking. Darren looked around at the half-dead survivors, the broken structures, the barely standing shelters. Rebuild what? You see a civilization here? We don't have food, no clean water, no homes. We don't even have names, Briggs. Most of us were born in cages. Briggs exhaled through his nose. We'll give you the tools. The rest's up to you. That pissed Darren off more than it should have. Oh, that's rich. You show up after decades, rain hell on our captors, and then just dump the mess in our laps? Briggs stepped closer, lowering his voice. You want us to fix everything for you? To wipe your tears and build you homes and hold your hands through grief? We're not gods, Breaker. We're soldiers. We kill. We secure. We move on. Darren stood, fists clenched. Then what the hell did we fight for? Briggs stared him down. For a chance, not a guarantee. You wanted the sky to break open? It did. Now what you do with the light pouring through it is your problem. That landed like a punch. Darren didn't respond. He couldn't, because the bastard was right. When Briggs left, Darren wandered. He passed children huddled around makeshift heaters, men with shattered hands trying to carry wood, women burying loved ones in shallow, unmarked graves. No wailing, no prayers, just quiet. Freedom wasn't loud. It was hollow. He made his way to the old signal tower, the one where Earth's voice had first broken through the static. Inside, a few former slaves had started repurposing it into a communication hub. One of them, a young technician named Clem, looked up as Darren entered. Breaker, Clem said. Everyone called him that now. It felt heavy, undeserved. Clem, Darren replied. How's the relay? Functional enough, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Earth Command is monitoring the channel now. They're sending another supply drop next week. Darren looked at the rusted console. Any word on the rest of the planet? Clem hesitated. You sure you want to hear it? Darren nodded. 3 other compounds were hit during the liberation wave. 2 are secured. One was already gone by the time the fleet got there. Slaughtered. Every last one. Darren closed his eyes. Rage swelled, but it had nowhere to go. What about the Eldari? They've pulled back, for now. Intel says they're regrouping off-world, licking wounds, but they'll be back. You know that, right? Darren nodded slowly. Yeah, I know. He left the tower with 1,000 thoughts gnawing at his spine. He didn't know where his feet were taking him until he found himself standing in front of the burn pit. They'd started it to deal with the corpses. Eldari bodies, drones, some humans too, collateral damage from the fight. The flames had turned into a permanent fixture now, always fed, always devouring. Smoke curled upward like a permanent scar against the sky. He stared at the fire for a long time. Then someone beside him spoke. My son died in that tower. Darren turned. It was the old man with the shovel, the one who helped kill the overseer. His face was lined with grief but steady, as if sorrow had become just another weight to carry. He wanted to fight, the man continued. Said he'd rather die than kneel one more day, and he did, died on his feet. You gave him that. Darren looked away. I gave him a grave. The old man shook his head. Number, you gave him a choice. None of us had that before. Darren didn't know how to respond. He didn't feel like a leader, not a hero, just a guy who was too angry to stay quiet. That night, he sat outside the tower alone. The stars were clearer now. For the first time in years, the orbital smog was gone. The moons hung silently in the distance, glowing like bruised eyes. He wondered if Earth still looked up and saw the same stars. Eventually, Briggs returned. He dropped a datapad in Darren's lap. "You're going to want to see this." Darren skimmed it. It was a report, a full file from Earth Command, lists of liberated camps, rebuilding projects, plans to form a council of Terran-born leaders to govern themselves under Earth's protective watch. But buried deep in the file was something worse. One Eldari ship had escaped. Not just escaped. Vanished. No tracking, no signal. And it had left from the sector containing the Eldari science bastion, known only as Facility 9. Darren looked up, dread sinking in. What were they doing there? Briggs shrugged grimly. Rumors say experimentation, bioweapons, brainwashing. They used prisoners as test subjects. Darren's chest went cold. He knew that name. His mother had whispered about Facility 9 before they took her, a place where slaves didn't die. They just stopped being themselves. Briggs saw the look on his face. You've got history there? Maybe. We're mounting a recon op. No promises, but you want in? Darren didn't hesitate. Yes. Briggs nodded. Then get ready, Breaker. This fight isn't over, not by a long shot. The fire behind Darren's ribs flickered back to life. Cold, focused, ready. Because breaking the sky was just the beginning. The dropship shook with turbulence as it tore through Charon's upper atmosphere, its hull groaning under the strain. Darren sat strapped in with 6 Earth soldiers, their visors down, weapons cradled in mechanical arms. Beside him, Briggs checked his HUD, eyes scanning through a digital fog of encrypted chatter. Facility 9. Even the name tasted like rust. Darren didn't know what they'd find there, but his gut told him it wasn't going to be corpses or empty labs. The Eldari didn't run, not unless they had something worth protecting. 2 minutes, Briggs announced. The lights in the bay dimmed to red. Everyone checked weapons again. Darren held a plasma blade now, standard issue, Earth military surplus. The weight felt foreign in his hands, but it was better than a pipe. Last chance to back out, Briggs said, half joking. Darren didn't even blink. Let's get it done. The hatch opened with a shriek of air pressure. Beneath them stretched the black zone, once a fertile stretch of land, now a rotting scar. The soil was charred. Trees looked like twisted wire sculptures. Facility 9 sat in the center like a tumor, squat and gray, with spires of surveillance tech jutting into the sky like needles. The team dropped fast and low, landing in a silent clearing behind a shattered wall of concrete. They moved in formation, rifles sweeping, helmets scanning for life signs. But the place was dead. No guards, no drones, just wind and dust. Too quiet, Briggs muttered. They breached the front gate with a coded spike, the heavy doors creaking inward. The stench hit them instantly. Chemical rot, burned flesh, the smell of things that weren't meant to be smelled. Inside, the walls were stained with something black and sticky. Lights flickered overhead. A trail of blood, old, dried, snaked along the floor deeper into the facility. Darren felt something cold crawl down his spine. They moved in tight formation, boots crunching over glass and bone. Room after room passed, abandoned labs, surgical bays, observation windows shattered by force. In one chamber, restraints were torn from metal slabs, bent outward, like something had escaped. "Jesus," one soldier whispered. Briggs stopped at a sealed bulkhead. "This is it, Central Research Archive." He keyed in the override. The door groaned open. Inside, the walls were lined with pods. Stasis tubes. Dozens of them. Most were empty, glass shattered, contents gone. But one near the far wall still glowed faintly. Something was inside. Darren stepped forward, heart hammering. A woman. Her body floated in thick fluid, wires burrowed into her skin. She looked human, except her eyes were open, glowing faintly gold. Her mouth moved slightly, like she was whispering something no one could hear. Clem's voice echoed in Darren's head. They didn't just kill people. They rewrote them. Briggs examined the console. Still active, stasis integrity holding. Says her name was Lyra. Was? Darren asked. Briggs hesitated. Records list her as deceased. Darren stared at the woman. She wasn't dead. She wasn't alive. She was held, caught between two states by machines too cruel to shut down. Suddenly, the power surged. Alarms shrieked to life. "Containment breach detected," a robotic voice blared. Red lights flared as steel shutters slammed over doors. "Ambush!" one soldier shouted. From the vents above they came, slim, hairless creatures moving like spiders. Not Eldari, not human. Twisted things with half-melted faces and bone-blade arms. Lab-born nightmares. The firefight exploded. Briggs and his men opened fire, cutting down the first wave, but more poured in. Darren grabbed a fallen rifle and backed against the pod. One of the creatures lunged at him. He fired point blank, the recoil almost breaking his wrist. Blood splattered across the pod. Lyra's eyes flared bright gold. The pod hissed. "Get back," Briggs yelled. But it was too late. The stasis chamber blew open, fluid cascading across the floor. The woman collapsed forward into Darren's arms, gasping like someone drowning in air. Her eyes locked on his. And in that second, he heard her. Not words, thoughts. So much pain. "Help me." Darren stumbled, his mind ringing with noise that wasn't his own. Telepathy? Psychic link? He didn't know. All he felt was her pain. Deep, endless, layered like scars over scars. Briggs dragged him up. "We need to move. Now." They fought their way back to the dropship, dragging Lyra with them. Half the squad was dead. One was missing an arm. The facility behind them roared with sirens as the creatures kept coming. Darren didn't look back until they lifted off. Facility 9 was burning. But something deep inside told him this wasn't over. Back at base, Lyra was placed in containment under medical watch. Earth doctors tried to scan her, but every time their machines fried. She screamed in her sleep. Names, numbers, gibberish that made grown men flinch. Darren sat outside her cell. Briggs approached, tired and bloodied. "We lost good people." "I know," Darren said. "We also found a weapon." Darren looked at him sharply. "She's not a weapon." Briggs crossed his arms. "She was made into one, whether we like it or not." "I've seen what weapons look like," Darren snapped. "She's just a victim." Briggs didn't argue. "Maybe. Or maybe she's the only reason we win the next fight." He handed Darren a data chip. "Everything we found at the facility. Coordinates, test logs, names. If you want to know what the Eldari did to her, start here." He left. Darren stared at the chip, unsure if he had the strength to see it through. But he had to, because the sky wasn't done breaking, and this time the storm wasn't coming from above. It was coming from within. Darren sat alone in the debriefing chamber. The lights dimmed to a faint amber hue. The data chip Briggs had handed him hours ago felt like it weighed a ton in his palm. Outside the reinforced door, soldiers passed by, their boots clanking across the steel floor. Inside, silence reigned, thick and waiting. He plugged the chip into the console and leaned forward. The screen flickered to life with a secure encryption header. Eldari Protocol 9, internal logs. Dozens of file entries scrolled down the screen. Video feeds, organ harvest logs, psychological experiments, something called Project Rebirth. Darren selected the first video. A cold, sterile lab, several stasis pods aligned in a row. Inside each pod, human children, some barely older than toddlers, electrodes attached to their temples, wires feeding into their spines. The audio hissed, but a voice, Eldari, speaking in their twisted dialect, narrated clinically. Subject 12, emotional resistance below threshold. Memory implantation failed. Subject expired at 0317 local time. Terminate and extract cortical material. Darren's stomach twisted. The screen cut to static. Next log. A different child. Screaming, locked in a harness as light and sound were blasted into his eyes. Testing Subject 19 for psychological resilience under stress. Onset of psychic activation remains inconsistent. Pain threshold has increased by 13%. Proceed to next conditioning level. Darren leaned back, bile rising. These weren't just experiments. They were trying to reshape people, strip them of identity, build something else. Then he saw her. Lyra. Younger. Maybe 14. Her eyes hollow, her arms restrained. Unlike the others, she wasn't screaming. She sat perfectly still, watching the camera. The Eldari scientist spoke nervously. Subject 34 shows unusually high telepathic resonance, capable of receiving and mimicking behavioral traits with a latency of less than 2 seconds. Long-term memory still resists overwrite. Emotional inhibitors remain ineffective. Caution advised. The screen shifted to another log. Lyra again. But this time she wasn't in a lab. She was in a chamber filled with corpses. Human. Eldari. Half-formed creatures. Her eyes glowed gold. Blood streaked her face. The log ended abruptly. Darren shut off the console, his hands trembling. She wasn't just a victim. She was the result of something terrible, and she had survived it. But how much of her was still human? He had to know. He left the chamber, storming down the hallway toward medical containment. 2 Earth soldiers stood guard outside Lyra's cell. They blocked his path, but Briggs appeared from a side corridor and waved them off. "You saw the files," Briggs said. "All of them," Darren answered. "You knew?" Briggs looked tired. "I had suspicions, but not the whole story." Darren stared through the reinforced glass. Lyra sat on a bench inside the cell, her eyes closed, hands folded in her lap. Her body was still healing, covered in deep scar lines from years of surgery. But it wasn't the physical damage that haunted Darren. It was the emptiness in her expression, like someone who had been burned from the inside out. "I need to talk to her," Darren said. "She's unstable," Briggs warned. "Half the doctors are scared out of their minds. Her brain fries every sensor they try to scan her with." "Then maybe she doesn't need more machines," Darren said. "Maybe she needs someone who's not afraid." Briggs nodded reluctantly. 10 minutes. You start losing control. I pull you out." The door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Darren stepped inside. Lyra didn't move. She kept her eyes closed as he sat across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, in a voice dry like paper, "You saw what I am." "You're not a thing," Darren said carefully. Her eyes opened. "I was. For a long time. They made sure of that." There was something beneath her voice. A tremor. Rage, buried so deep it had no surface. "I saw the footage," he admitted. "The tests, the rewiring." "They didn't break me," she said. "They tried, every day, for years." Darren leaned forward. "What did they want from you?" She looked up, her eyes locked onto his. "They wanted to weaponize emotion, turn pain into energy, turn love into control. They wanted to turn humans into living code. Programs that could mimic loyalty, erase rebellion." Her lip trembled. "They failed. With most, but with me." She swallowed. "I think they almost succeeded." Darren said nothing. Let her talk. "I still hear them sometimes," she whispered. "The scientists, their voices, their commands. I can feel when someone's lying to me. I can read fear like a language. And sometimes I want to hurt." She gripped the bench so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I didn't ask to survive," she said. "I just didn't know how to die." Darren sat beside her. "I know what they did. But I also saw what you did back there. You didn't lash out. You didn't run. You came with us." She nodded slowly. "Because I hoped maybe someone would treat me like a person again." He looked at her. "I'm not afraid of you." Her eyes searched his face. Then, slowly, for the first time, something shifted. A crack in the armor. Tears welled up, but didn't fall. She turned away. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I'm not safe." Darren stood. "Neither is anyone else. But that doesn't mean you don't belong." As he turned to leave, she said, "They'll come for me. The Eldari, they'll want me back." "I know," Darren said. "Let them try." He walked out, past the guards, past Briggs, past the cold stairs. The next day, a council meeting was held. Earth officers, survivor representatives, militia leaders. Darren stood before them, the chip in his hand. He told them what Facility 9 really was. He told them about Lyra, about the failed experiments, about the living weapons the Eldari were building, not just soldiers, but infiltrators, people who looked human, sounded human, but were programmed to destroy from within. And he told them the truth. "They weren't trying to win a war," Darren said. "They were trying to erase us. And we're not just fighting for territory anymore. We're fighting for the right to remember who we are." The room fell silent. Then someone clapped. Another joined in, and soon the entire room stood in silent agreement. The war wasn't over, but the purpose was clear now. Humanity had broken the sky. Now they had to burn what lurked beneath it. The War Council splintered the moment Lyra's name came up. Arguments erupted. Voices rose like gunfire, accusations flying across the makeshift war room. Some commanders demanded she be put down. A sleeper weapon, an Eldari experiment, a ticking bomb. Others argued she could be their greatest asset. Darren stood at the center of it all, eyes burning as the room tore itself apart. "She's not a monster," he snapped, voice cutting through the noise. "She's a victim of what they did to all of us. If she had any intention of hurting us, we'd already be dead." A bald officer with a scar across his jaw slammed a fist on the table. You don't know what she's capable of. You saw the footage. She tore apart an entire lab with her mind. She was a child when they did that, Darren shouted back. What would you have done? Briggs leaned forward, arms crossed. His voice was calm, but sharp as broken glass. It's not about what she did, Darren. It's about what happens next. If the Eldari send forces back for her, what do we do? Hand her over? Let them flatten this outpost to take her back? No one's handing her over, Darren growled. Not while I'm breathing. Silence followed. He looked around the room, at the tired, desperate faces of survivors who had bled and buried too many already. You all want a reason to fight, he said. A purpose beyond just surviving? She is that reason. What they did to her, they're still doing to others. Facility 9 wasn't the only one. She's proof. Proof of how far they'll go to unmake us. He paused. You want to win this war? Then stop being afraid of what they built and start fighting for who they tried to erase. It was a hard silence this time, but no one argued. The meeting ended with a split decision. Lyra would remain in protective custody under Darren's supervision until further analysis of her capabilities. Any sign of aggression and command would intervene. It wasn't a victory, but it was enough. The days that followed were tense. The compound bristled with armed patrols, drones hummed above, survivors trained with Earth soldiers, turning grief into discipline. Darren trained with them too. He needed to stay sharp, needed to be more than just a symbol. But his mind always wandered back to her. Lyra. He visited her every day. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in silence. Once, he brought her a tattered novel from a scavenged box of Earth relics, Frankenstein. She read it cover to cover in one night. I understand the monster, she said softly the next day, but I don't think I hate the creator enough. Darren didn't know what to say. One night, the alarms screamed. Darren bolted upright from his cot, grabbing his rifle before the lights even flickered red. He sprinted through the corridors as soldiers barked orders, people scattered, children cried. Then a blast shook the western wall. He reached the command deck just as Briggs arrived. Status? Unidentified contact. One Eldari dropship breached our outer perimeter. No full assault, just one ship. No gunfire yet. It landed outside the crater pass. Darren's blood went cold. They came for her. Briggs nodded grimly. We expected this. Darren didn't wait for permission. He turned and ran toward the containment wing. He found her already standing at the glass when he arrived, fully dressed, calm. They're here, she said. How do you know? I heard them, in my head, like they never left. Are they talking to you now? She shook her head. Number they're listening. Darren opened the door and stepped inside. We have to move you. She didn't move. They won't stop. You know that, right? No matter where you take me. Then we make our stand here. She looked at him. I'm not sure you understand what I can do. Darren stepped closer. I don't care. He reached out, slowly, and to his surprise, she took his hand. Xo? They moved her to the underground core, Earth's most secure bunker on Karan. Only authorized personnel allowed, no signals in, no signals out. She didn't protest. Outside, the camp fortified. Turrets armed. Scouts watched the crater for movement. But the Eldari didn't attack. They sent a message. A drone hovered just outside range, projecting an image into the sky above the compound. An Eldari officer, face pale and inhuman, speaking in a universal dialect. You are harboring Subject 34. She is property of the Eldari sovereign mind. You have 72 hours to release her or face full planetary cleansing. No bluff, no negotiation, just extermination. Terran stood beneath the projection, fists clenched. Beside him, Lyra watched silently. Then she turned to him. "If they get me," she said, "they'll use me to find others. I can feel it. There are more like me. Buried, hidden, sleeping. If they reawaken me, I'll lead them straight to the rest." "You're not going anywhere," Terran said. "We fight." She looked up at the stars. They don't care about death the way we do. That's what makes them dangerous. But it's also what makes us harder to break. He nodded. "Then let's make them regret coming back." The hours ticked by. Defenses were doubled. Evacuation protocols prepared. Earth Command authorized full combat engagement if even one Eldari scout breached airspace. But Terran didn't sleep. And neither did Lyra. The night before the deadline, she spoke. "If it comes to it," she said, "don't let them take me alive." Terran met her eyes. "Don't ask me to do that. I'm not asking, I'm trusting you." He reached out, touched her hand. It was trembling. "You're not just a weapon, and you're not alone anymore." Her voice broke. "I want to believe that." And somewhere in that bunker, between war plans and whispered dread, something raw passed between them. Not lust, not romance. Recognition, two people carved by pain, refusing to break. Together. The 72-hour deadline expired in silence. No warning shots, no negotiation, no further threats. Just the hum of anticipation, the kind that prickled under the skin and tasted like metal in the mouth. Soldiers lined the ramparts, turrets rotated, drones patrolled in aggressive sweeps. Everyone waited. Terran stood on the main watchtower, staring toward the crater pass where the Eldari dropship had landed days ago. A line of shadow danced across the horizon. Heat signatures flickered in the dust. Then, without sound, movement burst through the mist. Dozens of Eldari assault units emerged, sleek, insectile walkers with mounted plasma lances. Behind them, floating carriers, organic-looking crafts pulsing with blue energy, descended in synchronized formations. The ground quaked beneath them, a low mechanical rumble building in waves. "They're not posturing anymore," Briggs said beside him, his voice low. "This is execution." Terran clenched his fists. "Then let's make them choke on it." He ran down the tower steps towards the command deck. Inside, tactical officers fed real-time updates to field commanders through neural links. Holograms displayed enemy movement patterns, disciplined, surgical, merciless. The Eldari weren't playing games. Briggs turned to the team. "Defensive lines Alpha through Delta. Hold position. Artillery lock on primary walkers. Send anti-air to Grid 4. Hold them off the flank. Terran, get to the core. Stay with her." Terran didn't argue. He knew his place wasn't on the front lines. Not now. His place was with Lyra. She was sitting in the bunker's center, hands wrapped around her knees, eyes glowing faintly in the dim blue light of the power cells. She didn't look up when he entered. "They're coming," she said. "I know. I can feel them crawling across the edges of my mind, whispering." Terran knelt in front of her. "You're not going back." She looked up. "And if they kill you trying to reach me? Then they'll have to step over my corpse." She blinked, and something changed. Her fingers uncurled, trembling less, her shoulders pulled back. She exhaled slowly, like she was letting go of something ancient and cruel. "I can help," she said. "Lyra. Number, I mean it. You're fighting with weapons, guns, armor. That's what they expect. But I'm the result of their arrogance. I'm the wound they left on humanity." He stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I can find them, their minds, their intentions. I can twist it, not all of them, but enough." He hesitated. "You said using your powers hurts." "It does, but dying hurts more." Outside, the ground shook again. "They're inside the perimeter," Briggs barked over comms. "Delta wall breached. Contact in Sector 9. Multiple casualties. Medical teams compromised." Darren cursed under his breath. "Do it." She closed her eyes. The moment her mind reached out, the air changed. It became dense, electric. The lights in the bunker flickered. Somewhere in the distance, an Eldari craft veered off course and slammed into a hillside. Screams echoed in the radio channel. Alien, garbled, panicked. Then another walker collapsed, spasming, its operators shrieking as they tore at their own skin inside. Darren turned toward the tactical screen. Enemy forces were breaking rank. "Briggs," he said into the comm. "She's doing it. They're scattering." "Confirmed," Briggs replied, voice tense. "They're confused, some firing on their own. Our line's holding barely." Lyra's face contorted, jaw clenched in agony. Blood leaked from her nose. Her fingers twitched violently. Her breathing became ragged. "Stop," Darren whispered. "Lyra, that's enough." She shook her head. "Just a little more." And then something hit her back like a hammer. A shockwave rippled through her body and threw her against the bunker wall. Sparks flew. Consoles burst. Darren screamed her name and rushed forward, catching her before she hit the floor. She convulsed, eyes rolling back. But even in her collapse, her mouth kept moving, muttering names, locations, coordinates. His name. "Darren. They saw me. I saw them." Then she went still. Darren checked her pulse. Faint. But there. He laid her on the floor, gripping her hand. Above, the battle shifted. The Eldari's main column buckled as more units turned erratic. Earth's ground troops pressed forward, pouring into breaches. Explosions lit up the sky. 2 of the alien carriers crashed into each other mid-air, falling like dying gods. But victory didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like blood and smoke. And fear. Lyra was unconscious. Her body was hot to the touch, her veins glowing faintly beneath her skin. Something had changed. Maybe permanently. Briggs appeared in the doorway, dust-covered and limping. "We broke them. They're pulling back." Darren didn't even look up. "She did that." Briggs knelt beside her. "And she nearly killed herself doing it." "She saved us." Briggs nodded. "I'll give her that." The base was secured by nightfall. Eldari wreckage lay scattered across the horizon, their tech already being salvaged by Earth recovery teams. The victory was real. Tangible. But no one cheered. Too many dead. Too many burned. And one girl who might never wake up. Days passed. Lyra didn't move. Earth medics tried every scan, every neural treatment protocol. Nothing worked. It was like her mind had withdrawn, like it had gone somewhere else. Darren never left her side. He fed her by hand, cleaned the blood from her nose and lips, sat beside her bed and whispered stories from the world she never knew. About oceans and forests and rain that didn't sting. He told her things he'd never told anyone. About how he used to dream of being a pilot, even though he'd never seen a sky that wasn't blocked by slave grids. About his father's voice, and the way his mother used to sing when she thought no one was listening. About how, in the pit of his anger, he never thought he'd meet someone who could make him believe in something again. "You did," he whispered one night, brushing hair from her face. You made me believe. And then, just as he turned away, she spoke. Did I break the sky again? His heart stopped. He turned back. Her eyes fluttered open, still glowing but softer now. Warmer. You broke more than that, he said. You broke them. She looked at him, weak but alive. I'm still me? He nodded. Yeah, you are. She let out a breath. Good. I was afraid I wouldn't come back. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to hers. You came back. Outside, the camp began to rebuild. Inside, two broken souls, scarred and stained by war, held on to the only thing the Eldari couldn't code, couldn't clone, couldn't erase. The sky above Terran was clear for the first time in generations. No smoke, no orbiting slaver crafts, no black rain or screaming plasma trails across the clouds. Just quiet. And starlight. But inside the Earth Command Center, things were anything but calm. Reports had poured in for days, dozens of Eldari facilities, similar to Facility 9, abandoned in retreat. In several, they found ruined pods like Lyra's, some shattered, some sealed, their occupants already rotted. A few, still active. Earth's brass called it a strategic turning point. Terran called it a graveyard. He sat at the edge of the tactical debrief room, arms crossed as the new Earth general paced across the floor. A tall, crisp-voiced man named Mercer, who had clearly never spilled blood that didn't come from a paper cut. These enhanced subjects must be categorized immediately. We need centralized containment, behavioral analysis, and offensive modeling. Subject 34 proves the strategic viability. She disrupted an entire assault unit without firing a shot. She nearly died, Terran said sharply. Mercer barely blinked. And yet she didn't, which makes her more valuable than ever. She's not a blueprint. She's an asset, Mercer snapped, and the sooner you get used to that, the better. Earth is considering full deployment authorization of the Reclaimers project. We need results. Terran stood. She's not your project. She's a person. Mercer smiled coldly. People are unpredictable. Weapons obey. Before Terran could respond, Briggs intervened. Enough, he said, stepping between them. Terran, walk with me. Terran hesitated, then stormed out. Briggs caught up as they reached the corridor. He's not wrong, you know. Earth's going to want something for all the lives we lost here. They didn't come for a rescue. They came for control. And what did you think war was? Briggs said. A cause? A clean line between right and wrong? It's always been about who gets to call the shots after the smoke clears. Terran stopped walking. What about her? Briggs didn't answer, because they both knew. The next move Earth made would define Lyra's life forever. That night, Terran found her sitting near the old comms relay, the one that once cried into space for help no one answered. The facility around it was half buried in ash, but the signal tower still stood. She sat at its base, legs crossed, staring up at the stars. You're supposed to be in recovery, he said. She smiled slightly. I got tired of sleeping. He sat beside her, wrapping his coat around them both. They're talking about turning you into a weapon again, he said quietly. I know. They won't ask this time. They'll just take. I won't let them, she said. But if I run, if I vanish, they'll call me rogue, dangerous. The next time I use my powers, they'll come to stop me. He was quiet. Then she whispered, I don't want to hide. I want to choose. He turned to her. Then choose. Lyra looked at him, tears in her eyes. I choose us. The next morning, the camp was in motion, troops rotating out, civilians organizing into districts, Earth's ships loading equipment, personnel, and, quietly, prepping a security team to escort Lyra off-world for stabilization. She never showed, because by then, she and Darren were already gone. They didn't take a ship. They took a crawler, a slow, underground-optimized transport once used for mining, covered in dust, armed with only a pulse cannon and rigged with stolen terrain cloakers. They vanished into the outer wastes, far from Earth's comm reach. And they weren't alone. Over the next month, dozens of people joined them. Runaways, survivors, those who didn't trust Earth's smiling officers and clean promises, those who remembered what it meant to be hunted and wanted something different now. They built slowly, carefully. No walls, no fences, just signals, coded messages broadcast into the night, a beacon for the forgotten. Darren called it the fringe. Lyra called it the choice. And it grew, because deep inside every survivor was a seed no Eldari experiment could erase. Defiance. A year passed. Karen stabilized under Earth governance, but not without tension. Rumors of psychic deviance spread. Lyra's name was erased from reports, classified as a destabilizing myth. Darren was labeled missing in action. The fringe was considered a ghost story. But the signal never stopped. And somewhere beyond the grid, under a broken sky lit by a million unfiltered stars, a woman who had once been labeled Subject 34 stood before a gathering of children born free. Her voice rang clear. You don't owe the galaxy your silence or your obedience. You owe yourselves your story. In the crowd, Darren stood at the edge, arms crossed, watching her with pride. They'd tried to bury her, tried to cage her, tried to use her, but she'd broken the sky open. And now, through the cracks, something brighter was growing. Humanity. Real. Raw. And finally, free.